I know y'all want to hear stories about desert horror stories, but before we do that, let me advertise something first. Basically, for many of you guys who've known me for a long time, you know that besides from doing YouTube, I actually am a host for a television show. And today, for the first time ever, me, Horror Studio One, is gonna be doing Facebook Live for that television station. We're gonna interview some boy band guys, walk around the stage, and it's gonna be crazy fun. So if you guys are nice or want to support me, please click the link below and go to that Facebook page to give it a like. And maybe even watch the Facebook Live. Now, one thing I gotta tell you guys is that, sorry, this is mainly in Chinese. So basically, if you guys don't want to stand around listening to a bunch of Chinese people talk for hours, then don't do it. But if you want to, please give a like to Project Boys Power Facebook group, and you'll see me for like 2 hours just walking around this place interviewing boy band guys. If you really want to see that, go support. Anyways, without further ado, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for true scary horror stories that happened in the desert.
Camping in the desert. I've posted a few times and finally have decided to post this story from a while back. My dad is a journalist and a non-fiction writer, but at the time was a reporter for the Virginian Pilot based out of Virginia. He was working on a new book titled The Big Roads when this occurred. We often went on road trips for his research needs, and once his proposal for his new book was accepted, we went on a cross-country road trip from Virginia to California and back on Old Route 66 for the book. Me, being 13 years old at the time, I demanded he let me bring a friend along, and so there were the three of us. The first quarter of our month-long adventure went off without a hitch. We either stayed in motels, with the occasional stay at a grand old historic hotel. My dad, being the outdoors man that he is, decided that we should camp for about 5 or 6 times throughout the trip. The first night we camped, we were in the middle of literal nowhere. No one for at least 20 miles on either side in the middle of the Utah desert. When we arrived at our campsite in our rented minivan, my dad wanted to explore a bit, because at the bottom of the hills that our campsite was situated on was an old Pony Express stop. My friend decided to stay in the minivan until my dad and I had finished checking out the Pony Express stop to set up camp on account of all the wasps and bees outside. We were utterly alone, and as a rather jumpy and skittish 13-year-old girl, it became apparent we were isolated to the point that if anything happened, we would be screwed. That's all I could think about as my dad and I walked down the hill to explore. We checked out the old station, and everything was going smoothly until we were about halfway back up the hill. A large truck that we noticed driving down the old dirt road a few minutes before had turned into the campsite. We were surprised, but really didn't think anything of it. Maybe this guy was on an adventure too. The truck parked halfway up the road, and a man got out. He had what I think was a hunting rifle, and started hunting around the area my dad and I were in, about 50 feet from our campsite. Of course, this was an absolute no-hunting zone, and my dad became a bit concerned because my friend was closer to the stranger than she was to us. He yelled out to the man, saying that there were children around and he couldn't hunt there. As soon as the man turned to face us, I got an overwhelming sense of complete doom. I felt in my entire body that something was not right. The man looked us over and without saying a word, aimed his gun at us. My dad does not carry a gun or knife or any kind of weapon. I felt trapped. My dad ushered me behind a large boulder, but he didn't hide. He stood his ground. There was a solid minute of this man aiming his gun at my dad, and my dad standing completely still, staring back. In my mind, I considered all the ways this could go down. I was absolutely terrified this guy would shoot my dad, and somehow my friend and I would have to escape or get murdered during this tense minute. The guy lowered his gun, cocked his head to the side, and pointed at my dad using the fake gun fingers and fake shot him. He got in his truck and drove away. That night, my friend and I slept in the minivan in 90-degree heat. because I was positive this guy would come back and murder us all. He didn't come back. A few other creepy incidences occurred on that trip, but we were fine and safe after all. They mistook me for someone else. So, this happened last night, and I'm still kind of freaking out about it. My roommate had gone up to the foothills to spend Christmas with his family, and was there for about 3 days. On the 27th, around midnight, he asked if I could come get him, because he didn't want to stay another night. I don't mind. We've been best friends for 4 years, so I'm used to driving him to the city. Now, a little backstory. I live in a small rural area, and there are only 2 ways to get from our town to the next city, both of which take about an hour and a half round trip. One road is the main highway, but doesn't lead to the foothills, so it would take me 2 hours to reach him that way. The other road is a back road that leads straight to the foothills, so naturally I took that road. Now, this road is surrounded by nothing but desert for about 20 miles, with the occasional housing developments, so it's very dark at that time of night. It's also very secluded and less taken. The only reason you take it is to go to the foothills, the college, or are leaving the county. There's about 4 cars total going that way while I'm driving, and they all pass me within minutes. So, the speed limit is above 65 miles per hour, and I'm going 55. Something's wrong with my car where it shakes if I go above 60. After a while, it's just me driving. About 15 minutes into the drive, I see a car coming up behind me, and I pay no mind to it because I figured it'll just pass me like the other cars do. It comes up right behind me and is right up on my back. I'm more confused than I am scared because why is this person right behind me while I'm only driving 55 in the slow lane? I don't go faster, and I don't move, which I guess egged them on because they kept turning their brights on and off and start swerving behind me. Now, I'm thoroughly creeped out and keep hoping they'll either leave me alone or another car will drive by. None of those happen. They do this all the way to the foothills. I think, okay, they're either gonna stop or keep following me or turn somewhere. They keep following me. I'm nearing the exit where my friend is, so I'm afraid they're gonna see where my friend's family lives and hurt them. So I call my friend and tell him to meet me at the convenience store because I wanted to get something to drink. I get to the store and watch the car pass by the store and finally calm down thinking it was just some asshole messing with me. I meet up with my friend and we get some drinks and snacks and leave. For about half an hour, it's completely fine. It's just us talking about what we did during the holidays, joking around and stuff like that. I completely forgotten about the car until it started happening again. Now, the reason I didn't tell my roommate to begin with is because he kind of has a temper, so instead of being scared, he's pissed. Not only at the car, but at me for not telling him before. He's screaming for him to stop the car so he can deal with this asshole, and I'm refusing out of fear. Thing is, my roommate is a 5'10" tall bodybuilder, so he's a pretty intimidating guy, while I, on the other hand, is 5'6" and disabled, with the only thing going for me is that I carry a hatchet everywhere I go. So, he's used to scaring people off. I tell him no, that we're going to the police station in our town, and he calms down for a bit. As we get to the station, the car disappears again, and we sit there for about 15 minutes seeing if it circles back. Now, in hindsight, what we did was kind of stupid, because we didn't go into the station and ask for help, and just went home, without thinking they might be waiting for us to leave. We were constantly looking behind our shoulders while we were driving, making sure no one was following us, and when we got home, we thought they were gone. Now, this is the part that scared the hell out of me. We had been home for hours. My roommate was already passed out in his room, and I was the only one awake. It was about 4 a.m, and I had gone to the restroom, which is right across the hall from my room. Now, the way our house is set up is that the kitchen and living room are separated by a wall with a 4-foot wide space as an entrance, and the living room is connected to a 10-foot-long narrow hallway. Now, from the living room, you can't see most of the kitchen or past 2 feet in the hallway, and from the hallway, you can't see half of the living room when by the bathroom. I get done in the restroom and see lights flashing through the living room window. I'm in the hallway too afraid to move and get my phone or wake my roommate or anything like that. But my bedroom door is open, so I softly call for my dog, knowing he barks at anything that moves, hoping that it will scare them away. As I thought once he sees the lights, he goes friggin' nuts, but he's short so he can't reach the window, so he's in the middle of the coffee table barking. I see the lights turn off and wait for about 5 minutes before he starts barking in the kitchen. My roommate is now awake, asking me what the fuck my dog is barking at. I tell him, and he goes back into his room and gets his boxer on leash and tells me to get my hatchet and phone. As I'm getting my stuff, I hear a thud against the back door and then another. They're trying to kick in the door. I called 911 and explained the situation, and they said they'll be there in 10 minutes. I get back to my roommate, and we head to the kitchen where he opens the back door, and in stumbles 2 guys about my height dressed in all black. They look up at us and start freaking out because they've got 2 guys with fairly large dogs, one who looks like he injects steroids, and the other with a hatchet. One guy is screaming, "This isn't her house! How the fuck did you fuck this up like that?" And the other one bawling his eyes out. Apparently, they were going to break into one of the guy's ex-girlfriend's house, who happened to be my next-door neighbor, and kidnap her. The one guy got the houses wrong and mistook me as the guy's ex because I had my hood up and they could not see my face, and I have the same build as her. The guys arrived shortly afterwards and took them. It was freaky. And I hope it never happens again because I don't know what I would have done if they were really after us. Broken down. I'm 24 years old. This happened 2 years ago on Memorial Day weekend. After a solid week of partying in Las Vegas, 2 of my friends and I, all dudes same age, had to endure the horrific drive from LV to Los Angeles. If you haven't done this drive before, it's typically a 5-hour stint through the desert, but on a busy weekend, it can be extended to 7 to 9 hours. And hungover from a free day binge is always painful, right? Our other friend that we were flying out talked us into staying for the better part of the day to wait out traffic. We had a buffet and lazed around the pool a bit, more hoping to recover. We decided to leave at 3 p.m. Perfect. We'll be home by 8. Wrong. 2 accidents and a billion people on the road impeded our progress greatly. Took us 6 hours to get to Barstow, typically 2 hours. We filled up, gas and coffee, and hit the road again. The stop took an hour due to the massive amount of people passing through the area. Back on the road at 10, more traffic and a wrong turn. It is now 2:30, and we are passing through Santa Clarita, about 45 minutes from our destination. Bam! Suddenly, it sounded like a piece of steel ripping like paper, then exploding, but I managed to pull the car off the freeway and onto a side street. I called AAA, and they said it should be about 30 minutes. Shitty situation, but 30 minutes is not bad. The neighborhood we were in was alright, multiple gated communities, but the road we were on was a desolate and a bit of an artery between communities. We all napped, and about 15 minutes later, I was awoken by a car driving by in the opposite direction. It was a piece of shit SUV with 4 people inside it. I couldn't tell what they looked like, but they were all looking at us. A few minutes after that, I get a call from AAA. Apparently, when I called, they thought that I said Santa Clara, which is 6 hours north in the San Francisco area. It would be another hour before they could reroute someone to us. We go back to sleep, and roughly 30 minutes later, that same SUV drives by our side of the road, going much faster this time, and as they pass, they flash a light into my car. I'm not sure if it was to scare us or to see if there was anyone inside, cause my windows were fogged. but my red flags went up. For safety reasons, I always kept a Bowie knife and a miniature bat under my seat. I know, it's childish, but makes me feel safe. So I took the knife and handed my buddy in the passenger seat the bat. He was asleep and didn't understand what was going on, so I briefed him, and he passed it off and was out again. 15 minutes later, the SUV pulls up about 300 feet behind my car, brights on, and I officially begin to freak the fuck out. I wake up my two friends without them moving their heads, so Team Creeper can't see us. We begin forming strategies, but we are genuinely scared since we are stranded and outnumbered. The SUV turns off the lights, and I can see them passionately talking about something. So we sit there freaking the fuck out and looking at them, just waiting for butt rape. I decide to call AAA again, and they give me a, 15 minutes bullshit, home stretch, right? The passenger and driver's door both open, and two linebacker-sized men get out, hoods up and in all black. The driver leans against the grill of the car and smokes a cigarette, staring at us, and the passenger pisses on the sidewalk. I felt like they were playing mind games with us. Maybe they saw the light from my cell phone. It felt like the passenger was pissing forever. The three of us are just sitting there, stewing in our own fear. The passenger zips up and talks with the driver. The other two doors open, revealing one small person with a beanie pulled low, and another large hooded man walk out. The four begin to talk and walk casually towards my car. I pull my knife ready. My buddy has his bat, and my other friend pops up his fist like a fighting Irishman. They get close and stop about halfway. In the distance were the lights of the tow truck. I look back and see them get in the SUV. As the tow operator gets out, we get out and he starts his business. The SUV speeds off fairly quickly. We didn't get home until 5 a.m. I'm not entirely sure what they were planning. I am assuming they thought the car was abandoned and wanted to take it, or something more sinister if they knew we were in there. My friend in the back seat has long hair, so maybe they thought he was a girl? I'll never know, but it was an intense night. Moral of the story: never leave Vegas late if you're driving, and maybe buy a shotgun. Thanks for reading. The sound he made wasn't human. I've posted here before, because I was a reckless child. I wanted to share another story with you. This happened about 17 years ago, so please forgive me if the exact details are a little fuzzy. It was the summer of 1999, and I was spending the vacation with my mother in New Mexico. I was a 12-year-old girl going 21, and had severe attitude. I made friends easily with a few girls that lived just around the corner from my mom's house. We spent every moment together that summer. We were a group of 4, all of us thinking we were older and smarter than everyone else. Nikki, Katie, Julie, and myself, we were the last generation of home phone lines, playing outside on the trampoline until dark and sleepovers. We watched VHS tapes, listened to cassette tapes on our Walkman. It was okay to let your children walk around town at night, and we rarely locked the front door. We had no cell phones or internet. My backyard had a concrete wall around it and a gate. Behind the wall was desert, as far as the eye could see. Just a barren wasteland of dirt, cacti, shrubs, and mountains way off in the distance. This town had a major railroad truck running straight through it, and there was a major street that had gas station galore, restaurants, hotels, and attractions. We all received the same warnings from our parents. Stay out of the desert, stay away from the tracks, and don't walk the main strip at night. Do you think we listened? Absolutely not. Julie, Nikki, and I spent our days walking through the desert, crossing the tracks down the strip to Katie's house. Sometimes we would just walk around till dusk. Some days we would go to my house and jump on the trampoline. This particular day, we go to Katie's house prepared to stay the weekend because her parents were out of town and we were going to have a party. The first night, the girls were jumping from a spiral staircase to a giant beanbag. I refused to participate in this due to my extreme fear of heights. We then got down to sleepover business, so to say, and decided to watch the original Exorcist. You know, the one with Linda Blair? Fucking scary shit, man. I didn't sleep. The second night, we all told our parents that Katie's mom was going to drive us to the movies. We all got money for the movies, and then promptly walked down the strip to get junk food at the little store. Now, I wish that we were aware of our surroundings, but we weren't. We were absolutely oblivious to the man who followed us all the way back to the house. I feel that I should mention that Katie's parents were loaded. They had a huge property with numerous buildings and broken down cars that her dad was remodeling. Their house had a large open kitchen, dining and living room. There were no walls and the whole room was lined with windows. There were 2 doors, front and back. The day went just as planned. We got our junk food and made it home safely. We made pizza in the oven, and for some reason, one of the girls turned on the TV to the news. As we were eating, we heard a story about staying indoors because there was a report of a suspicious man walking the strip. That's it! Suspicious man. We laughed and joked about this man. Fast forward a few hours. I don't remember what happened, but as girls do, someone said something that hurt Julie's feelings and she stormed out of the house. I went after her and opened the front door just in time to see her light up a cigarette. I sat with her on a bench while she bitched about the other 2. Suddenly, the air got thick with anxiety. Julie felt it too. I quietly asked if she felt like we were being watched. She responded with a tiny nod, and then we were blinded. Someone was in a car in the driveway with their brights on us. My heart was racing as I stood up and pulled Julie out of the spot she seemed to be stuck in. As we turned to run inside, the man made a sound. I can't describe the sound, other than a high-pitched squeal that turned into a growl. I was scared beyond all reason, but somehow I managed to get myself and Julie back inside the house. As soon as we got inside, the headlights went off and it was pitch black again. I locked the door and turned off the light. By this time, Julie had regained her composure to tell the other 2 what had happened. As I frantically checked the back door and turned every light off, I told them to shut up and listen by the back door. I heard the car door close, and I was praying to every god that he would go away. Then, right by my cheek, the door handle started to turn, slowly, then frantically. I crawled away from the door and moved to where my friends were. For the next 2 or 3 hours, we sat still as stone and listened to this man bang on every window and door, trying to get inside. The phone was located across the room right next to 2 windows. I finally got the courage to run to the phone and I called my mom. I told her that we were all alone and someone was trying to get inside. I hung up with her and waited. Julie screamed to the man that we would call the cops, and all of a sudden, the bang stopped. We waited and listened. Listening for him to get to his car, and then that sound again, the squeal that turned into a growl, and then he was gone. Eventually, my mom and stepdad showed up and checked the whole place out. They found tire tracks and cigarette butts in the driveway where his car was, proving he had watched us for quite a while. The truly scary part was the scratch marks all over the doors and the windows. Needless to say, Katie spent the rest of the weekend at Nikki's house and had a great story for her parents when they got home. Our parents didn't punish us for lying and being reckless. I guess 2 hours of torture at the hands of a madman was enough. We made a report to the police, but the man was never caught. So, suspicious creepy fuck, let's not meet. Went on vacation, came within a few seconds of being abducted. This story happened in the early 2000s. I was vacationing in the Caribbean with my family when I was about 9 or 10 years old. This particular island, like many in the Caribbean, was largely impoverished. Of course, the resort communities where all the tourists flocked to were beautiful slices of paradise. As a young kid staying at a fancy vacation spot, you don't really think about the reality that you're in a foreign country that you don't know very well. You're not familiar with what goes on outside of the gated resort, and you certainly aren't aware that, as well as being known for gorgeous beaches, many islands in the Caribbean are hubs for human trafficking, drug smuggling, etc. The sheer sketchiness of what I'm about to describe didn't fully hit me until years later when I was in high school and reading about the disappearances of Amy Bradley and Natalie Holloway, who both vanished while on vacation in the Caribbean in the late 90s and early 2000s. One night, I left the resort with my family to go on one of those sunset boat ride sort of deals. We joined another family and took a shuttle to a marina that was maybe a half hour away from the resort. I remember as we rode to the marina, I got more of a sense of how destitute some of the less touristy areas of the island were. I saw many of the locals living in small, ramshackle huts made out of savage metal, and that landscape was much more barren desert, unlike the lush gardens that were watered daily within the walls of the resort. Anyways, the shuttle dropped us all off at the docks, and we went on the boat tour. It was an amazing time. The boat's crew pointed out unique wildlife and told us about the history of the islands. By the time we returned to the docks, it was pitch black out, probably around 11 p.m. at night, and barely being 10 years old, I was thoroughly exhausted. I hopped off the boat and waited along the dock back to the parking lot where the shuttle had dropped us off earlier. My parents and the other adults who were with us didn't really seem to be paying attention to me, and by the time they'd gotten off the boat, I was probably a decent 200 feet ahead of them. Now, the marina itself was very well lit, but as soon as I turned the corner to the parking lot, I may have well fallen into a cave. I could hardly see anything. I squinted my eyes to try to see if the van we had arrived in was parked nearby, but after a few seconds, somebody suddenly grabbed my shoulder very tight. "Who did you come here with?" The voice was scolding, accusing me, and I immediately began freaking out because I thought I was in trouble. "Someone drove you here?" I began to speak and tried to explain that I was with my family, and we were waiting for our driver, but the man cut me off. "You drove here with me. Here, come to my car." At this point, the guy began pulling me further into the dark parking lot towards a vehicle I'd never seen before. I won't even say that I was panicking at this point. I was very confused and knew that something was definitely not right about the situation, but I've been raised to listen to adults and didn't want to get in trouble for not listening to this guy. But as he continued to pull me towards his car, I realized that it was much too small to fit the number of people I'd arrived with. And this is when I started really pulling back against the guy and trying to break his grip. I was about to raise my voice and start screaming when suddenly a set of floodlights turned on and lit up the parking lot. My parents and the group of people we're with turned the corner and the guy immediately let go of my arm. I look up at him, and all I remember is that he looked scary. He was bald and had scars on his face. He was probably in his late 40s. Clearly, he didn't realize that an entire group of people were just 30 seconds behind me. His eyes were wide, and he had a dumbfounded "oh shit" expression. One of the men who worked at the dock called out and said something to him, but he sort of threw up his arms and shrugged and walked away. On the way back to the resort, my dad asked me something like, "What did that guy want from you?" And being the child that I am, I said, "I think he thought I rode in on his shuttle and that I was lost or something." And apparently the explanation was perfectly reasonable, because we never really spoke of it again. Anyways, I guess the moral of the story is that if you have young children and like to take them with your exotic or unfamiliar locations, remind them to keep smart and keep their guard up, even in paradise.